Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. I recently had to reset a password, and one of the security questions was, who was your least favorite teacher? So I had that bad memory all day. I called my best friend, remember her, and she was like, ugh, now I gotta go the whole shift thinking about her. Then I had a dream the other night featuring my least favorite teacher from high school, and I was like, ew, you again? I feel like, unfortunately, we all have a least favorite teacher who we only remember because of the bad experiences we had with them. I had a lot of wonderful, very amazing teachers, but we're not talking about that today. This is a story about bad teachers. And this one is an interesting one for me because this case takes place in the Pocono Mountains, a place I used to live. So the lead character in our story today is Joanne Chambers. She was a first grade teacher at the Cool Ball Learning Center, which is an elementary school in the Pocono area of Pennsylvania. She had been teaching in the school district for 8 years, and she was known as a fun and well-liked teacher by her students as well as the faculty. She was married and had a 10-year-old son. Joanne started receiving multiple scary and threatening letters in 1993, and it went on for over a year. What was particularly troubling about the letters that she was getting was that they were so specific and detailed that they had to have come from someone who knew her, or at least was watching her closely. The letters were all delivered to the Cool Ball Learning Center through the principal, and they were not signed. The letters contained personal information about Joanne. The letters included threats, as well as allegations such as she brought pot to school and was showing the other teachers. It's specifics like that that start to make you think that it could be another teacher or someone else working at the school that comes in contact with the teachers. And if it was, you'd think it'd be easy enough to narrow down who it could have been by asking the other teachers if they'd heard these rumors. But that didn't happen, and Joanne continued to get threatening mail. Eventually, Joanne began receiving letters addressed to herself at school as well as at her home, which is not a good sign because this person clearly knows where you live. They were pretty concerning in nature, like, I can get you in one try. No one will ever prove it. They may not think so, but I'm smarter than all of you, you stupid. Okay, yikes. On top of all the mail that she was getting, other teachers also began receiving letters about Joanne in their little faculty mailboxes. So obviously it's someone who had access to the teacher mailboxes and knows when to put them in when no one is around to see. It was really difficult to pinpoint any suspects because everybody liked Joanne. Other teachers at the school, other faculty that worked in the district, her students and their parents. Because she was so popular and had no known enemies, herself and the other faculty had no idea who could be doing this to her. In one of the letters to the principal, the writer said to check her desk for a bottle of Jack Daniels, and sure enough, in the bottom of her desk drawer, there was a whiskey bottle, but some of her personal items were missing, notably a picture of her and her son. In another one of the letters, the writer made a reference to the superintendent of the school district as Colonel Clink, which was a character on the show Hogan's Heroes. Interestingly, someone had overheard another teacher in the school using this obscure reference to a 30-year-old TV show that wasn't widely in syndication at the time. The teacher that was overheard was Paula Noraki. She was another first grade teacher at the school who had been teaching for more than 18 years. Paula was surprised to hear this allegation, if you will, and was shocked that Joanne was receiving these letters and thought that it couldn't have been anybody at the school because Joanne was so well liked and there had to be another explanation. The letters continued to show up, but other incidents started to occur as well. In one instance, Joanne was going to sit down at her desk. She put her hands under herself to smooth out her dress and found that someone had put feces on her chair, which is, so awful. Eventually, the letters were sent to an FBI crime lab in Virginia, where they were able to recover a partial print, but other than that, the investigation really didn't go anywhere. A few days later, one of the letters made a threat that they were going to poison Joanne's coffee and that they had 4 chances to poison her coffee that week. So, on a set-up hidden camera, several teachers were seen coming and going out of Joanne's classroom, and sure enough, we see someone reach over Joanne's desk, pick up her coffee cup, turn around, and walk out of the room. And guess who it is? If you guessed Paula Noraki, you'd be correct. Remember that picture of her and her son that was taken from her desk when they found the whiskey bottle? Well, her face had been cut out and photocopied over top, a nude photo from a magazine, and sent out to teachers and parents. The mail also said things like Joanne was a lesbian, that she had AIDS, and that she should not be teaching their children. The FBI suggested that she be given a polygraph test to prove or disprove her claims. And Paula, remember Paula? She wanted to take a polygraph test as well in order to clear her name, since she was pretty much the only suspect at this point ever since the Colonel Klink comment and the surveillance footage of her walking off with Joanne's coffee cup. So they were both administered polygraph tests, which asked them questions related to their knowledge of the threatening letters and the other occurrences over the last 10 months. So if you didn't know, polygraph tests or lie detector tests measure your heart rate and your breathing and are designed to determine the truth in yes/no questions. You can't ask specific questions like, where were you on the night of the 13th? They are also not admissible in court, but they are valuable in helping get information from people. So both of them were given tests, but one of them failed. Can you guess which one it was? When asked if they had any involvement in the making or the sending of the letters, Paula was told that she had failed the polygraph test, and she was visibly and understandably upset. She had volunteered to take the test to clear her name, and was expecting this to make things better, not worse. But now she was the primary suspect. Paula, being very frustrated at this point, told investigators that if she was doing it, she didn't know she was doing it, and they wouldn't catch her doing it because she wasn't doing it. I don't know if it's the wording of that, but it leads on the suspect side. She also said that the video surveillance of her taking Joanne's coffee cup was because Joanne asked her to. In the video, you can see Joanne and Paula standing at Joanne's desk and then leaving together, and just a few seconds later, Paula walked back in to retrieve the coffee cup. Police asked Paula if they could search her home, and she said yes, of course, and they ended up taking an old typewriter, different types of paper, and different types of envelopes that she had in her home. The analysis of the typewriter determined that it was not the typewriter used to type the threatening letters, and the paper and the envelopes taken from Paula's home also did not match the letters sent. Despite all of this, Paula was still a suspect because her personality and teaching style were almost the opposite of Joanne, and it was thought that she was jealous of her. Paula was very much a by-the-book person and more on the strict side, whereas Joanne was a more fun teacher and had a more relaxed teaching style. The threatening letters continued, but were soon including death threats. It got to the point where Joanne had to transfer to another school for her safety. But not long after her transfer, a box showed up at the front door of her new school that had a Barbie inside with its hair cut short and styled like Joanne's, and was wearing a dress that Joanne frequently wore. The Barbie had a razor blade in its neck and red paint all over. She was obviously scared and ended up telling her husband goodbye because she really thought she was going to be killed soon. As if all of this wasn't enough, a month later, Joanne said that a car tried to run her off the highway. As she swerved and pulled over, she looked over at the car, and in the driver's seat was someone she recognized. She called the police to report this incident, and when asked who she saw, she said it was Paula Noraki. Paula denied this but she was still arrested and charged with stalking, harassment, simple aggravated assault, making terroristic threats, and recklessly endangering the life of Joanne, which added up to over 100 counts. Because of the charges, Paula was suspended with pay by the school district, and if convicted, she would spend 5 years in jail. After Paula's arrest, all the letters and the threats stopped. This appeared to confirm her involvement, but she maintained her innocence, so she hired an attorney and a private investigator, which seems like she should have done this months ago. But whatever, better late than never. The private investigator she hired was a former state policeman, and when he was reviewing her case, he thought she was guilty because there was just so much overwhelming evidence seemingly against her. Remember when the FBI found that partial print on the letters that didn't match Paula? Well, the defense team saw this as a promising lead, so they were interested in DNA testing the letters as well. The investigators agreed to this, but only under the stipulation that the results be fully disclosed, regardless of whatever the outcome was. This meant that if any of her DNA was found on the letters, the envelope seal, or the stamps, she would most likely be going to jail. She told her defense team that there was no chance that any of her DNA would be found, and that she wanted to go ahead with the testing. Paula had to pay for the testing herself, which ended up being over $7,000. Samples of Paula and her husband's blood were also sent to a lab, along with some of the letters, where they removed the stamps and tested the backs as well as the envelope seals for their DNA. They did end up finding some DNA on the back of a set of stamps as well as an envelope seal, but the samples were very small. Luckily, they were able to amplify the cells to get big enough samples to test and establish a profile. They compared the sample from the back of the stamps to Paula and her husband, and it was not a match. Paula thought this was it. Surely this would exonerate her, and the hunt for the actual culprit would be on. Her defense team was like, okay, now we need to know who was sending these letters. It wasn't Paula. Who could it be? Who else would know all of the details of the letters? It was at this point they started to think, could Joanne be doing this to herself the whole time? Maybe. Paula's defense team learned from one of the police departments in the neighboring towns that Joanne apparently had a history of making suspicious police reports for things like burglaries and fires, all of these crimes that she was a supposed victim of. Paula's private investigator decided to look more into Joanne's past employment history and found out that at her previous job, she also reported finding feces on her chair, which is very suspicious that this would happen once, let alone twice, under similar circumstances. The defense deduced that Joanne was doing this to herself because she loved attention. She loved that people would feel sorry for her, and she would get off on making herself the victim to these crimes. They had this idea, now they needed proof. They decided that they wanted to test the letters for Joanne's DNA. Like, I don't know why this wasn't done in the first place, or at least much sooner to get to this point. But anyway, they needed Joanne's DNA sample. In order to get a sample, investigators went through her trash and found a used straw, a tissue, and a cotton swab with some earwax on it. I don't know if you know this, but once you put your trash on the curb or in a dumpster, you relinquish all rights to it. It's city property now. It's not your trash, it's the government's trash. The straw, tissue, and waxy cotton swab were sent to the lab for testing, and the testing confirmed that there were 2 profiles found from the trash, and one of the profiles was a match for the DNA found on the letters. I am so excited I can almost smell the justice from here. Because of the results of the trash testing, Paula's defense team wanted all charges dropped, but the prosecution refused. Like, so annoying. So Joanne was to submit a blood sample to test against the DNA found on the letters and the trash, and it was a genetic match for the DNA on the back of the stamps and the envelope seal. But the prosecution once again refused to drop the case against Paula. Like, are you kidding me? Just a side note, the chance of someone chosen at random in the US population that would have a similar profile is 1 in 14,925. In the small town that it was highly unlikely that anyone would have a similar DNA profile. During the trial, the prosecution brought up once again the coffee cup incident, probably out of context, and the Colonel Klink comment, which seemed to be their strongest and probably only evidence against Paula. The defense team had brought in teachers from Joanne's previous school district, and they all said that she had made similar claims as she was making now. But the smoking gun here was really the DNA test determining the match of Joanne's DNA blood sample, matching the backs of the stamps and the seal of the envelope. I think what is the most outrageous to me is that on the witness stand and under oath, Joanne had an explanation for why her DNA was on the back of the stamps and the envelope seal. She said that the prosecutor had left her alone with the evidence and that the stamps fell off one of the envelopes, so she licked it to put it back on, and when that didn't work, she reattached them with a glue stick. OMG, Joanne! The prosecution team didn't have an explanation as to why she was left alone with the evidence, and also didn't have any explanation as to why her DNA was found on the envelope seal. The technician that had extracted the DNA evidence then went on to testify that she found no evidence of a glue stick when she was testing the stamps. In an extremely convenient side note, the technician was also a lifelong stamp collector and can easily distinguish the difference between a stamp that has been attached with a glue stick as opposed to a stamp adhesive. The trial ended up lasting 5 days, and the jury took less than 2 hours to reach their verdict that found Paula not guilty. Because obviously, over the course of this whole ordeal, Paula had spent over $100,000 in legal fees, as well as lab testing for her defense. She filed paperwork to sue Joanne, the police department, and the school district, so hopefully she was able to reach a settlement and get the justice she deserved. Joanne went back to teaching and working with a Pennsylvania school district as a reading specialist. Literally, who would hire Joanne at this point? Like, are you kidding? Anyway, it appears as though she retired in 2015, so no other coworkers are at risk of being subjected to potential claims of harassment due to Joanne's lack of attention. How about there were little consequences for her? Very small. Like, the situation would have been different if I was a superintendent, but whatever. It has been tougher trying to find out what Paula is doing now. She had gone back to work in the Pocono School District, but obviously at a different school than Joanne. I believe that she is still living in the area based on a newspaper obituary that described her as like a daughter for the person the obituary was for. I hope she's doing well and was able to move on with her life, and I hope she doesn't have to deal with people like Joanne anymore. Literally, how stressful. Anyway, don't cry wolf. Don't harass your coworkers. Don't file false police reports. Don't move to a new school district and tell the same tall tales. Don't be like Joanne. Please be good. If you care to share a comment about your least favorite teacher and a story, please do. I'd love to read it. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. OMG, Joanne.